and welcome to another episode of The Never-Ending Experiment. This is Kim Anderson, and I want to talk about lowered baseline syndrome. This is kind of a depressing subject. There's a lot of different words for this idea. It's something that's been happening, I think, for probably millennia, but I do think that it has increased in the last 10 to 15 years. Other words for it would be enshittification, stupidification, just constant lower quality of everything, basically. What it is the expectation that we will continue to allow our quality of life to go down slowly, bit by bit, in a way that's like the frog in the boiling water that they use as a metaphor. It's the idea that people who want control over the masses will slowly take away the things that they want in order to enrich themselves. So it's basically the slow impoverishment of the majority of the population. And it's happening in so many different ways. One of the biggest ways that this has happened in the past was through industrialization, civilization. These were all things that look good in the sense that they offer something very impressive, but they require a sacrifice. And that sacrifice is usually quality of life. Less freedom, less resources, less socializing. Basically, a lot of those things that make human life worth living are the things that are slowly eroded and degraded when these large, powerful systems take over society. And civilization is just a high concentration of human beings in an urban or city area. And there are a lot of things that we get out of that system. A lot of conveniences, a lot of impressive, interesting things, a lot of different services. It gives us variety, but it takes us away from community, and it pushes us into a system of competition. Industrialization also did a similar thing. It gave us huge machines, huge amount of power over the environment. It gave us so much stuff, but it took away a lot of our health. It took away a lot of the environment. It gave us a lot of toxicity and pollution instead. And so these sacrifices that are being required of us are slowly taking away our lives, but they're giving us impressive things. In this era, of course, it's all about technology and the digital era and the internet. And now what we've seen over the last decade is the quality of the internet and the technology that we use has gone down a lot. An easy example would be Gmail. I remember, I don't think that they even had ads on Gmail at all when it started. And then they had ads at the top. And then they decided to put the ads in with the emails, so that the ads looked like emails. And that was annoying. And now they've managed to increase the number of these fake email ads, and they intersperse them in between our regular emails. It's so obnoxious. I remember too when they started putting advertisements in bathroom stalls so that you were looking at ads when you were sitting on the toilet. Advertisements are a huge part of the lowered baseline syndrome. And this is happening all over the place. I mean, that was just one example, but, I was on one of the streaming services, and then I went off it and it came back on, and now there are way more ads. I don't think there were ads on there at all. And the reason that's happening is that companies want growth, and they want growth no matter what. So what the desire for growth does with a company, when you have a good quality product, what will happen is that everyone will buy it and then they will be fine with it and they won't buy it anymore because they have a good quality product and it will last. But that won't give the company growth. So there's no actual incentive for companies to make good quality long-term technology. What this all has to do with, though, is what I'm saying is that the profit motivation does not lead to a stable or sustainable society, either environmentally or economically. So what that's done is it's increased the level of desperation for companies to be making money off of other people. And of course, this isn't just corporations. This is regular people as well. So much of what these companies are doing is building machines to take over the jobs of human beings, in which case the people won't be able to make any money. So everything is working towards creating this sense of desperation. And that sense of desperation leads people to try and use each other as much as possible as a means to gain profit. And that destroys social trust, because now everybody will just imagine that the only reason anyone's talking to them is to get money out of them. And oftentimes that's exactly the case. But they can't make more money if the corporations keep creating machines in order to put people out of work. So the competition is getting really, really fierce. And with higher competition comes a lower quality of life, because now there's less for everyone and everyone has to fight more just to get their little bit. Now, without necessarily making it sound like a big conspiracy, I don't believe that there's just one level of elites making all of the decisions. It's multiple groups of them, and also regular people that are a part of those groups that are pushing in different directions. You know, when they were pushing for AI, they were also pushing for universal basic income, because people could see very well what I'm saying is, how could you make all these machines to take over people's jobs and then still expect people to have jobs in order to pay for all this stuff that's now being made by machines instead of humans? It's an impossible situation. We're being put between a rock and a hard place. And with that comes all kinds of societal destruction. The food supply is another big area of lowered baseline syndrome, where the food quality is getting lower and lower. I'm really, really shocked at some of the labels on the food now, where they manage to obscure a lot of the important information about the food, while at the same time giving a bunch of extra information that isn't needed. We were staring for a long time at this package of meat that said 16% meat protein. And I wasn't sure if it was actually a meat product, because if you look at the back and you do the math and you put together the protein, it wasn't adding up. So we couldn't figure out what this thing was actually made of. And there was all kinds of ingredients in the ingredient list. But of course, you don't really know how much of those ingredients are actually in it. And you wouldn't expect to know exactly how much is in it. But the fact is that there is a purposeful push away from really understanding the quality of the food to make you think that just these basic nutrients are needed and not actual organisms, which is what we are meant to eat. So we're getting this destruction of whole foods and good quality organic food. And in replacement, they're giving us this strange information about specific nutrients, as though this reductionist view of food will actually give us nutrition. But that's not how it works at all. We need all of the different aspects of an organism in our diet in order to survive. That's just what organisms need, and we are an organism. So we're getting this lower quality food with all kinds of additives that nobody asked for put into it, making it seem like it's advanced, but it's actually just lower quality, because every time you add something to food, it's because you've taken something away. If you add vitamin C to orange juice, it's because the vitamin C has already been reduced that would be there naturally in freshly squeezed orange juice. When they add coloring to a food, it's because they want it to be perceived as a colorful food, because color in the food often represents nutrition, that there are specific nutrients that have color. So if they take those nutrients out and then they add color and then they add other vitamins, they think that that's equal value, but it's not. So it's a really dead-end situation, and it's definitely caused by the economic system and by the overpopulation that that economic system requires in order to achieve constant growth. Now, I've very rarely heard any politician speak out against growth, and I think that's really scary because growth is definitely our number one problem. And we're creating growth out of nothing. This is the problem. We can't create nothing and expect people to pay for it, but that's exactly what the digital economy requires, is basically paying money for something of no substance that's just energy and maybe a little bit of hardware. But then even all of that hardware is built to fall apart. So we're really building castles on the beach, on the sand, and the tide's going to come in and wash it all away. And it comes from short-term thinking. And I don't really know why people are so short-term, because even this group of people called long-termists are really, really, really not long-term. They're only long-term for technology. But human beings can't actually survive the kind of future that they're putting in place, because these are people who are detached from reality, detached from their bodies, and detached from the earth. That's why they keep imagining a future out in space, because they really, really aren't able to take care of the earth because they don't understand it. And I think it's just that we've been so alienated from what it is to be human that we're like kind of de-evolving into something not quite human. The lowered baseline too just comes from general economics, and that has to do with increasing poverty. More and more people are impoverished now than they were a generation ago. And it's obvious in how hard it is to find a job. It's obvious in how fewer people are going out and socializing. And, they measured how much time people back in I think it was the 60s, even before that, how much time they went out with their friends and did things and socialized. And nowadays, that doesn't happen as much. And this is part of the lowered baseline. If you look at some of these high-rise apartment buildings, that people are living in these tiny little cages. I mean, they barely have anything at all and surviving on very, very little. And this is the dystopian, futuristic scenario that a lot of people are living in. But that didn't happen all at once. There was a time where all human beings were living amongst nature, amongst other animals, and living in community. And somehow this all has fallen apart into these tiny little pieces. And we're getting less and less and less per person, and treating people more and more like we are machines, rather than understanding that we make machines. We should be making machines to increase our quality of life. And so even though we have machines that are increasing our quality of life, if they don't work for very long, then that's just creating more work for us to go find new products. So again, this is a dead-end situation. I mean, what it's leading to is just really, really, really low quality of life for more and more and more people. And the divide between rich and poor has been increasing as well. I've watched while the middle class of Canada just kind of fell down into poverty. So it's very hard to understand why and how that happened. Other than that, people are just not recognizing that the system we have in place doesn't work. So there are a lot of people trying to protect this situation that isn't working for other people. But meanwhile, they will go out of their way to manipulate people into giving them money. So the increasing impoverishment, the encroachment of advertisements into every single little space possible, the lowered quality of every product that we use so that we end up with a bunch of junk. I mean, I'm trying to remember what it was like growing up with appliances. Obviously, I was a kid and I didn't have to have any responsibility for that. But I don't remember things breaking as much as they do now. I don't remember just buying a product and then after a few months it would just fall apart. It definitely seems like things have just gotten worse and worse in terms of how usable they are. And oftentimes now you can find a vintage product from the 60s or early 70s and it will work better and last longer than a product that you're buying from last year. The same thing. I mean, that's really, really upsetting. And the fact is, a lot of these companies aren't set up to exist in the future. So they don't have any maintenance. They don't have any replacements. Even though we have now 3D printing where we could do that, again, these systems are not available enough or set up enough for it to be commercially usable. Again, when you provide cheap products that don't last, there's no incentive to fix them because fixing it will actually show how falsely cheap it was, and it's often more expensive than the product itself. And that's why so much of this crap ends up in the landfill and not getting fixed and reused. And a lot of these repair cafes that have come up are relying on volunteer work because they know if they started paying them a fair wage, that they wouldn't be able to make any money with that kind of business plan. So how do we stop this? How do we stop this process of lowered baseline syndrome? How do we increase our quality of life? Well, I think the number one thing is overpopulation. We need to stop having kids. I think the other thing is we need to really, really take seriously that we need to build a new economic system. And we need to understand that that economic system has to be for a global economy, and it can't just be for a small group. The fact is, the level of globalization right now is overwhelming. And even if we do have a world war, I don't believe that that's just going to shut down all of our connections right away. In fact, it may actually increase our international connections. We're just not really sure who we will be connected to. Because as soon as there's a new leader or a new government in any given country, those things could change dramatically. Oftentimes, war is exactly the time of lowered baseline where everybody's quality of life goes way down. And that's just an expected sacrifice. You know why you're sacrificing it. The thing about the lower baseline that we've had more recently is it's only for profit motivation. That's the only reason why that's happened. To just constantly take things away. I mean, airlines are one of the biggest examples of this. I mean, I remember when you could do standby. It was just a perfect thing. Like you could go to the airport without a ticket, get a standby ticket for the place you wanted to go, and just wait until one of the flights left that had an available seat and you got the seat. So if you had flexible time, they accommodated you, they were able to fill up those extra seats with standby tickets. It was a perfect system. But somebody in those boards of directors at an airline decided that they could be making more money by treating people like crap. And so they changed it. So now what they do is they overbook a lot of the flights. And then they kick people off those flights. People that never signed up for standby. People that needed to get to the direction that they're going. People that needed to even board other flights on the other end that had connecting flights. Get kicked off of their flights. Just because of how often there are a few no-shows on a flight. But think about what that does now to social trust. So back in the old days, this was an incredible convenience. It worked out so the people that needed the ticket, that had a place that they needed to be at a certain time could get there. And the people with flexible time were able to just hang out and take that flight for a decent price. Now, because they're gouging everyone, they're treating people horribly. This is an abusive system now, where just randomly people get kicked off of their flights, including children, through no fault of their own, but because of these greedy, selfish people at the top level of the airlines. Same thing with the food on the airlines. It used to be just automatic that you would receive, a drink and food if your flight was long enough. That was standard practice. That was in every ticket. The idea that you had to pay extra for food is a recent phenomenon. And again, this is from the number crunchers at the top who just want growth, but you can't grow in an industry that is sustainable and that is responsible. So now they starve people, and you have this huge class segregation now. If you don't have enough money, you have to either bring your own food or figure out another way to eat. And what that's done is it's increased stress for everyone. It's enormously stressful now to fly. They've even gone so far as to reduce the amount of space that you have, to reduce the amount of baggage that you can have, and to just charge people for every tiny little thing. That's lowered baseline syndrome. The mistreatment of other human beings is really what the core of it is. I strongly believe it's related to overpopulation for the reason that every other thing that I've mentioned, from civilization to industrialization, was also powered by the excess and sacrifice of human beings. What it really comes down to at its core, I think, is the perception that what is impressive is also important. But I think that a lot of times what's impressive is not what's important. Things like spaceships are impressive, but breakfast is more important than spaceships. More people need breakfast than need spaceships, because nobody needs spaceships. We don't need it. This is an extra. So we're constantly being asked to sacrifice the basic things that we need in order to fund extra stuff that we don't need, just because it's impressive. And it's ego. It's just a huge amount of egomania from so many different people, because it's not just the people at the top. It's those millions of people at the bottom that wish that they were at the top, and that they have the exact same mentality as those people at the top. And a lot of times that's what happens now with people's lifestyles, is that they are sacrificing those little things that would keep them healthy. And yet at the same time, they're being given a whole bunch of things that are impressive, like AI. Think about this system now that we have. People are being employed in the AI industry so that they can take away jobs from other people. So they're reducing the number of jobs on purpose and giving more jobs into AI for the purpose of destroying jobs. And there's still no universal basic income, even though they know that that's the only way that people will survive this onslaught of AI. We are living in times of mass insanity. I think it's really what it comes down to. And the lowered baseline syndrome is part of that psychological and physical assault on us from a philosophy of growth and techno-utopianism. Because we're really not seeing any techno-utopia. We're seeing a lot of techno-dystopia. There's a lot more of that. Even just weird little things like now they're making movies completely out of AI. But they're really creepy and they feel off. But again, it's impressive, but it's not important. It's not important to have these things. So we're sacrificing everyone's quality of life in order to increase the quality of non-life. And a lot of that technology isn't even improving. I think the last time that I noticed there was an improvement in smartphones, for example, was around 2010, maybe 2008, somewhere in there. And it was like the highest resolution they'd ever had on a phone. And my friend was showing it to me, and I just thought, why do you want that? Why do you need that? We've had so much increase in resolution in our screens that we never really needed. And I think it was competition with photography maybe that they wanted to finally get a digital technology that looked as good as film. But since then, there were no other improvements. There have been no improvements in the last decade or more. Instead, it's been a decrease in quality, decrease in what apps can do, decrease in how everything works, because now they try to push people onto rental subscriptions instead of ownership. And it's created just a desperation for ownership over one's life. This is a basic feeling that people want, that people need, to feel like they have some ownership and some control over their own lives. Even children want that. When I was a child, that's what I wanted. I hated being a child because adults were always making decisions for me. And I wanted to be able to make my own decisions. And now that I'm an adult, I still get treated like a child. We all get treated like children. We live a long time and yet we don't really grow up. It's very weird. So I don't know if the answer, I think my answer is pretty straightforward. A lot of people don't agree with me. And so it's hard to get that through, like that we really, really need the population to come down in order to gain freedom, in order to gain resources, in order to gain back that quality of life. And I don't know if it's going to happen. I think that this war is probably going to reveal these deep divisions in the culture. But what I do know is a lot of people are being brainwashed and fed a lot of propaganda about needing more technology and needing more children when we don't need more of either. What we need is better community, better organization, better systems understanding, better cooperation. We need to get along better and compete less. We do need to compete with ourselves in the sense of being excellent, but we shouldn't be competing with each other to make something that everybody needs. If we're moving towards a direction where we give everyone what they want, there needs to be no competition, because you can accomplish a lot more with everybody working towards the same goal than when you have people divided working against each other. So that's about all I have to say about that. There's a whole lot of examples, but, I don't think the solutions are that easy, because it does require degrowth and it does require a rethinking of our mentality of just expansionism. Otherwise, I think if we continue to expand and grow, I think we will see, again, more and more loss of quality of life. And it takes a lot of work to try and gain that back and to protect our own lifestyles and to keep them healthy. So thanks for joining me. This has been Kim Anderson on The Never Ending Experiment. Thank you.